Today we are examining Bill S-1002, an act respecting the Girl Guides of Canada. During the first part of our meeting on this matter, our committee will hear from the sponsor of the bill, our esteemed, distinguished colleague, the Honourable Senator Mobina Jaffer, as well as from representatives of the Girl Guides of Canada, Jill Zalmanovitz, who is the Chief Executive Officer, and Brenda Abrams, who is the Director of Governance. So thank you all for being with us today. If we may please have opening comments, and then we'll move to questions. Senator Jaffer, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and to all of you for agreeing to study this bill. Girl Guides of Canada, Guide du Canada, is an organization that is very close to my heart. I would like to begin today by taking you all the way back to the year 1909, when girls in England demanded to take part in Boy Scouts rally organized by Lord Baden-Powell at the Crystal Palace in London. These girls saw what the Boy Scouts were doing and wanted to have the same opportunities. Lord Baden-Powell was impressed by their tenacity and initiative, so he asked his sister Agnes to create a program just for girls. The movement became a place where girls took the lead in discovering what was important to them. From the beginning, these girls wanted new experiences. Today, the Girl Guides of Canada, Guide du Canada, consists of 75,000 girls supported by 20,000 women from coast to coast to coast. Guiding empowers girls to be curious, confident, resilient, independent, open-minded, fulfilled, to be prepared, and also always to do their best. Guiding has long played a leading role in helping girls develop the skills and experience to try new things, with programming focused on self-esteem, mental health, financial literacy, healthy relationships, and outdoor experiences. Gender-specific programming focuses on girls themselves and their unique needs and social barriers, and enables them to observe women in positions of leadership. In this ever-changing world and increasing challenging global landscape where sexism exists, there is no question that girls need the Girl Guides of Canada, Guide du Canada, now more than ever. Today, girls in guiding discover who they are. The girls set their own goals. Along this path, the girls know they will become confident, resilient, and independent. The Girl Guides of Canada, Guide du Canada, are also revered ambassadors for Canada abroad. By enabling girls and young women to participate in global initiatives, including the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women and Leadership Development Opportunities, Girl Guides of Canada, Guide du Canada provides the tools they need to build a better world. Honorable Senators, guiding is in my DNA. My mother grew up as a Girl Guide and worked with Lady Baden-Powell in Kenya. She often told us stories from her adventures as a Girl Guide, going camping and being in leadership roles in Kenya. When she moved to Uganda as a married woman, she became a Girl Guide leader to give Ugandan girls an opportunity to excel. My sisters and I were also brownies and guides. I was the second Queen's Guide in Africa. I was also a Girl Scout in Tacoma, Washington. I learned many leadership skills. In 1975, when I came to Canada as a refugee, Girl Guides of Canada helped me integrate into Canadian society. As a shy Muslim woman, I felt comfortable learning leadership skills from other women. I had very few resources. Girl Guides of Canada provided me with free leadership skills. Girl Guides met me at the place where I was at the time and provided what I needed to thrive and to become the person I am today. For many years, as a Girl Guide Commissioner in Canada, I was able to encourage other women to become leaders. Honorable Senators, Girl Guides of Canada, Guide du Canada, has had a tremendous impact on the woman that I am today. I sit here today in full support of the Girl Guides of Canada, Guide du Canada, on their ongoing commitment to enable girls to be confident, resourceful, and courageous, but most of all, to make a difference in this world. The Girl Guides of Canada, Guide du Canada, is asking that a private bill be introduced before the Parliament of Canada to ensure its current roles and procedures as a modern organization and to accurately reflect reflected in their governing charter. Senators, the Girl Guides of Canada, Guide du Canada's governance is formalized through a special act of Parliament titled An Act Respecting the Canadian Council of the Girl Guides Association, 1917. This act has been amended twice, both in 1947 and 1961. For the most part, the governing act remains largely unamended. In this private bill, Girl Guides of Canada, Guide du Canada seeks to modernize language to reflect Girl Guides of Canada, Guide du Canada's goals and missions. So, honorable senators, I ask you to support this bill because it gives girls in our country a place to thrive, create self-esteem and confidence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Jaffer. Ms. Zelmanovitz, please.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jill Zelmanovitz, and I'm the CEO of Girl Guides of Canada. I wanted to tell you that although I'm the CEO now, I also started off as a Brownie and a Girl Guide and a leader in this movement. So like Senator Jaffer, I'm also very much a product of Girl Guides of Canada. I would like to thank you for inviting us to speak on behalf of this private bill, and especially to Senator Jaffer for sponsoring the bill on our behalf. I'll start by providing a little bit of background to our organization. Girl Guides of Canada provides a safe, all-girl environment that invites girls 5 to 17 to challenge themselves, find their voice, meet new friends, and make a difference in the world. In guiding, we strive to ensure that girls and women from all walks of life, identities, and lived experiences feel that they truly belong and can participate. Our mission is to be a catalyst for girls empowering girls, and our vision is a better world by girls. Girl Guides of Canada has over 100 years of history and a strong and growing future. Since our founding in 1910, over 7 million girls and women have been involved in the organization. Today, we serve more than 75,000 girls with the support of more than 20,000 women volunteers. Our programming has evolved over the years, yet remains firmly rooted in our history and core values. Advancing the well-being of girls and young women has always been fundamental to our organization. In guiding, girls have a safe, inclusive space to explore what matters to them. A space where girlhood is celebrated, where girls are inspired and supported by women mentors who are committed to positively impacting girls' lives. These women leaders also have the opportunity to develop valuable leadership skills that they use in guiding and beyond in their lives. As a girl-driven organization, Girl Guide of Canada's programs give girls choice, voice, and the scope to take action. We recently launched our exciting new Girls First programming, which puts girls in the driver's seat. Girls choose the activities that interest them the most, becoming more empowered as they move through the program. Through activities that range from STEM experiments to outdoor adventures to discussions on healthy relationships, girls are empowered with the tools to navigate their world. Now I would like to hand it over to my colleague, Brenda Abrams, who will speak about this private bill.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the committee. I'm pleased to be here to speak about the bill and to answer any questions you may have. As Jill mentioned, Girl Guides of Canada, Guides de Canada, was established in 1910. The organization's governance was formalized through a special act of Parliament in 1917, and unlike most other charities in Canada, Guides de Canada Girl Guides governance is governed by this special act. As the Senator mentioned, the governing act has been amended twice in 1947 and 1961 with very minor changes. However, at this point, the act remains largely untouched. Now, 57 years since our act was last amended, we are seeking administrative amendments to reflect our approach as a modern charity. I'm pleased to say that this private bill will allow us to ensure that our current roles and procedures as a modern charity are accurately reflected in our governing charter. This enactment would replace the 1917 Act with a new act that continues the Corporation of Girl Guides of Canada and makes changes relating to the corporation's affairs. Our objectives in working with the Honourable Mobina Jaffer to put forward this bill are to update the language to reflect our goals and mission, to update our procedural provisions, and to incorporate certain provisions of the Canada Not-for-Profit Corporations Act into our new Governing Act. For example, one of the proposed language changes is to update the corporate purpose. The proposed purpose statement reads, to promote the development, health, and well-being of girls and young women by operating educational and related programs on leadership, self-development, self-esteem, citizenship, community service, and social engagement, as well as issues impacting girls, young women, and their well-being. This purpose statement, which has been approved by the Charities Directorate of the Canada Revenue Agency, is better aligned with Girl Guides du Canada contemporary mission, vision, and program. In addition, the bill permits Girl Guides du Canada to use the following English and French titles: Girl Guides of Canada, Guides Canada, and Guides du Canada. Lastly, the bill will enable Girl Guides du Canada to mirror key provisions of the Canada Not-for-Profit Act. For example, Section 158, which outlines the objective standard of care for directors and officers. Section 151, which outlines the corporation's ability to indemnify directors and officers and purchase directors and officers insurance, and that Girl Guides du Canada has the capacity of a natural person as outlined in the Canada Not-for-Profit Act. I would like to highlight that these proposed changes were reviewed by Corporations Canada. They provided valuable input which was used by Girl Guides du Canada and the Senate Law Clerk's Office during the drafting of this bill. Girl Guides du Canada is constantly evolving to ensure our programming remains relevant to girls and young women. The bill will allow us to reflect our current operations as a modern charity and our approach to serving girls and young women. On behalf of Girl Guides du Canada, our volunteers and families involved with the organization, I would like to thank you for your study of this bill. I'd also like to extend our thanks to Susie So of the Senate Law Clerk's Office for her assistance. I'm pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Abrams. And we have a long list of questions, starting with the Deputy Chair, Senator Stuart Olson, to be followed by our colleague, Senator Dalphon. Senator Stuart Olson, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here with us today. I just have a couple of questions. Where is your heaviest enrollment? Is it urban or rural these days?
We have both. I would say that we have a heavier enrollment from the urban areas just because we have that's where more girls live. So percentage-wise, it would look higher. But we find that in rural areas, unlike in urban areas, there are actually less programming options for girls there. So it often is that almost every girl in a rural area would be involved in the Girl Guide Association in some way, because it does become one of the main things that girls do there.
And my second question, if you'll permit, just does Girl Guides today reach out to, say, the Scouts? Do you have programs that incorporate men and women or girls and boys rather than separating out an organization?
We are very good friends with the Scouts, and we certainly do a lot of activities together that happens at the national level, provincially, as well as locally, where there are a lot of very strong relationships with the groups. It is important to note, though, that Girl Guides of Canada really does believe that a very special part of what we offer is the girl-only space, so that a special type of empowerment occurs when girls are together in a safe space and can address issues that actually uniquely affect girls. So in many cases, we're doing a lot of interaction with Boy Scouts in terms of activities, but our core programming is specifically related to that girl-only space.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Dalphon, followed by Senator Weston. Senator Dalphon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to the Senate. And I certainly have no axe to grind with the association, though I was never a member, as you can see. However, in my previous life, I was a corporate lawyer, and so I still have fun reading corporate laws, and so I did read carefully your bill. And I had a few questions, really. First, does the organization has employees, permanent employees or part-time employees? How many do you have?
We have about 175 across the country. Some of those would be part-time for our camp staff, and some are permanent employees.
Thank you. And that brings me to my question, really, which I wrote to Senator Jaffer in September of this year. The Canada Corporation Act provides that any non-profit corporation can decide to be continued under the Canada Not-for-Profit Corporation Act, and all special acts was intended to be continued over time under that new piece of legislation. Most societies and non-profit corporations in Canada are continued under that piece of legislation. You made a compelling case here for having a special piece of legislation. There are historical reasons, there are things you want to preserve, and I could relate to that. However, you are carefully drafting provisions from the Canada Not-for-Profit Corporation Act into your bill, and they have been word by word, no change, but some are missing. And one which is missing, and which is really of concern to me, is the one related to unpaid salaries, unpaid wages and salaries. All corporations have that provisions that says that the directors are responsible, personally liable, for up to 6 months of unpaid wages and salary. And that is sections 146 of the Canada Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. And that applies to all societies like the Cancer Society and all the other corporations that are also doing good work for Canadians. And I don't understand why you haven't reproduced in your bill that provision dealing with liability of director for wages and removing protections for the 175 employees of the corporation.
So I will say that we do have those protections, and we take them seriously. When we conduct our audits, when we do our reviews, all of those obligations, whether at a provincial basis or at a federal basis, are reported, monitored, and are part of our compliance. So we absolutely do it. The Canada Not-for-Profit Act, Section 19, does provide for some things that govern, that help govern with respect to private acts. And so we followed that, and we sought the advice with respect to what should go in around the director and officer liability to make sure that that was clear. I can't specifically answer you on why that particular provision wasn't included. I can say to you, from an organizational perspective, from our bylaw perspective and our policy perspective, we do follow that.
But it's more than to follow that. It's a right which is granted to the employees by the law.
Absolutely.
I understand that the directors of your corporations are entitled to have insurance coverage, so that will be covered for that liability. Yes. But so my question is, why have you removed that liability in favor of employees from your bill?
What I would say was what we put into the bill with a consultation with Corporations Canada and with Revenue Canada, those provisions we felt were essential and transferable that would govern those kind of liabilities. We have no objection to that provision being there, but we do feel through our corporate bylaws and our policies and our compliance model that we do monitor that. We do ensure from a board perspective that those liabilities are paid and covered, and that we owe a duty to our employees to ensure that those are there. We understand our obligation to protect that public interest and that coverage, so we do it by bylaw, by policy, and by compliance process.
If the chair allow me.
Absolutely.
I understand from your testimony that you will have no objections to that provisions being incorporated to your bill.
No.
In order to protect the employees.
No, I have no objection.
Thank you.
Senator.
That was going to be my question. Thank you, Senator. Very well. Thank you very much, Senator Delphine. Senator Weston to be followed by Senator McIntyre.
No.
Just two quick questions, Chair, if I might. First of all, congratulations on the work you do.
Thank you, Senator.
We recognize the importance, and the question really for me is twofold. One is we have so many minority underprivileged children in this country. And are you able to access them? Are you able to include them in your organization? Are you able to reach out to them? And that's my first question. My second question really is I see and can understand the changes that you're asking for, and I certainly understand and appreciate Senator Dalphon's comments. The question really for me is what's changed for girls today? What's happening in our society today that may or may not make your organization even more relevant? And how does this bill that you're asking the Senate to review support that or promote that?
Thank you very much for the question. We do have a real wish to include a greater diverse population, both in our girls and our leaders at Girl Guides of Canada, to the point where we actually have right now as one of our 4 strategic priorities a diversity and inclusion strategy, in which we are really trying to reach the girls who we actually think might most need the experiences at Girl Guides of Canada. So we are working very hard on that, and on creating spaces where those girls do feel particularly safe in a world that we know that that they are facing multiple barriers to success. So we are working on that. In terms of the relevance, I do think that if for a period of time, perhaps Canadians and other people around the world did think that we had this whole boy-girl thing figured out, and that girls actually did have equal access and women had equal access. But certainly with the recent occurrence with the Me Too movement, we have become increasingly aware of the fact that girls do face unique barriers. We've also become increasingly aware that we need to start having these conversations with girls when they're young in a safe space. And so when we go out and when we talk to parents, what we actually hear is that Girl Guides of Canada providing the purpose that's actually in this new bill that we've put before you today is exactly what girls need, and that perhaps this is a time that they actually need it more than ever. So the relevancy is very important, and I would say that relevancy is one of the reasons that we've come before you today, because we want to make sure that the purpose actually reflects what we're doing.
If I may, Chair, add to that what Senator Weston was asking is, Senator, one of the things that Girl Guides does is girls that are not allowed to go to a mixed group. They can go in many mosques. They have these Girl Guides. I used to run a group just in a mosque, and what that did is that the girls were able to do activities that they would otherwise be denied. And so this is an opportunity for girls to get leadership where they otherwise would be denied.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Weston. Senator McIntyre, to be followed by Senator Day.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentations. The bill consists of 21 clauses. I note that Clause 21 would repeal the Act and the 2 statutes that amended the Act in 1947 and 1961. Ms. Abrams, in your presentation, you have explained the rationale for replacing the Girl Guides of Canada's legislation. As I further understand, the proposed act would be consistent with the provisions of the current corporate statutes in Canada?
Yes, sir.
They would?
Yes, they're consistent with the current statutes, and they're also consistent with the current civil and common law with respect to directors and officers' obligations, all the things that I would call good governance with respect to charitable organizations and to not-for-profits and profit organizations.
Thank you for your answer. Would the powers of the Girl Guides of Canada be expanded in any way under the new legislation?
They're not expanded. at the time that the 1917 legislation was passed, there wasn't this concept of corporations having the powers of a person. And so that is put in this legislation. But by bylaw over the years, we've put those powers in, they're consistent. So this reflects the current structure and governance structure of the organization rather than granting us new powers. It reflects what we do now. It reflects how we act. It reflects how we report as a charitable organization.
Thank you, Senator McIntyre. Senator Day, to be followed by Senator Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. I echo my colleagues' comments. Thank you for what you're doing. Very important contribution to our society. Could you, Senator Jaffer talked about outside of Canada Girl Guides. What relationship does the Canadian branch have? Is it part of a federation, and is there a larger home base somewhere?
There is. So Girl Guides of Canada is a member of the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts, which is the umbrella organization. It currently includes about 148 member organizations, and each of those organizations would run a Girl Guide or Girl Scout organization in their country, and it's situated in London.
In London. Okay, could you tell me, is the London head office, do they dictate how you can use their intellectual property? Are the logos and the name owned by the international body and you're licensed to use it in Canada? Is that how that works?
There's no formal licensing agreement. In order to be a member, there are certain criteria. Most of the members have been member organizations for quite some time. We pay a fee, not so much for intellectual property, but for some of the training opportunities that are available to girls who are members of Girl Guides of Canada as a result of being a member of the World Organization. So they currently operate 5 world centers around the world. These are training centers that our girls can actually attend and meet Girl Guides from around the world. It's an incredibly enriching experience to be able to participate in that.
So what I'm wondering is this proposed legislation vetted by London along with your bylaws to make sure you comply with the international norms?
It's not. So London, the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts does look at the constitutional documents as well as the promise and the name of the organization. And those are really the concerns to make sure that we are still operating within the boundaries, but they are certainly aware of the work that we're doing. They're very much in support of us updating the purpose so that it better reflects what they know Girl Guides of Canada is offering rather than the purpose that's listed right now in the bill.
Okay. I have another
Please
question.
go ahead,
Do I have
Senator
time? And this flows from Senator Jaffer's comments in relation to different religions involved. What type of training do you have for your leaders in relation to tolerance, religious tolerance, and other society norms that we would want to make sure your leaders are well versed in?
We do have a very strong statement of inclusivity, and we have partnered that with on-the-ground training for our leaders so that it's not just something that the organization says, but it's something that we can really stand behind in terms of our leaders putting that into action. So that talks about not just diversity, but how to make every girl really feel like she belongs in the organization, no matter what her background is. So we do have a training program for our guiders that's specifically around diversity and inclusivity.
Chair, if I may add, Senator Day, I've been involved in this country for 40 years with this group, and I can assure you that Girl Guides of Canada is very inclusive and is always upgrading their knowledge as we become more diverse, and there has never been a question that you don't belong to the group. There sort of is, as soon as you become a member, I felt that I was part of the group, and it was never about one faith keeping the other out. It was always very inclusive.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Day.
Thank you.
Senator Klein, to be followed by Senator Deakin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your attendance this morning. This is embedded in some legislation already, and so I just have a quick question in this regard. Had you given thought to, instead of introducing a new private statute, incorporating under the Canada Not-for-Profit Corporations Act?
We did consider it. The act is really there are a couple of things going on there. It's part of our DNA. It's how we were created. It's something that we've anchored onto from the very start of the organization, where a group of women got together, had an unincorporated association, and then came to Parliament the only way they could come to Parliament and really have this private member's bill. And so for us, it is part of who we are. It has us stand alone as an organization that does have this kind of interesting and unique relationship with the Government of Canada in terms of how we operate and where we've started. It's a pretty unique partnership that we'd like to keep in place. And we believe that based on how the Canada Not-for-Profit Act was set up, that there is room for both a special act and the Canada Not-for-Profit Act, that we can continue the private work that we do under a private bill, but still meet the public interest by maintaining our connection with the act, updating the act, and really maintaining this relationship we have with the government in terms of how we've conducted ourselves and how we've grown. It was a pretty unique situation back in 1917. I mean, the women who got together at that point didn't even have the vote, but they were able to come to here, to this Senate, and create this association. And it's something we don't want to lose, and it's a very positive message for our organization.
Okay, thank you.
And
So,
Senator, if I may please add, a number of years ago, I was with Senator Danino, we did the same thing with the Boy Scout Act. So we have a special act under the Boy Scouts and the Girl Guides. This is a special relationship. So that's something that's been carried on.
okay, so thank you for.
To me, it's actually a surprise, the amount of identification with this act. I really didn't think that our members necessarily knew or cared about how we were actually created. And I think it's testimony to their attachment and to this process. This is actually something that is incredibly important to them. This process here today, the fact that we have the opportunity to speak to you, the fact that they are literally tuning in from across the country because they're very excited about this process. So, I could see how it would be easy to think that this isn't important. It is really, really important both to our board of directors and to our members.
Thank you for that understanding.
It may be unusual, but there is a viewing party going on right now, watching this process.
Highly unusual.
Well, okay, go Girl Guides of Canada. So you mentioned that this makes it more of a modern charity.
Yes.
And will change the way of some operations. What are the significant changes, if anything,
The principal
does this allow?
The principal change here is the updating of the purpose between the 1917 Act and this legislation. That provision hasn't been changed in any of the minor amendments that were done through. So while it doesn't change fundamentally the internal legal governance, the bylaws, how we operate ourselves, how we deal with provincial councils, deal with real estate, deal with our programming, it does bring the purpose into alignment with our current mission and vision.
Okay, so you weren't constrained the way it was, but this just modernized.
We weren't constrained. I mean, it's the language is clearly out of date, and we took great care in structuring this and going to the charity section with Revenue Canada to make sure that they would be happy with the language and that it fit within the CRA's view of what a proper charitable purpose would be. So it really is updating it, and I believe this is a purpose that can last forever.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Deakin, to be followed by Senator Dagenet. Senator Deakin, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the presentations. to my honourable colleague Senator Jaffer. Thank you for your leadership here. I really was glad to hear the response to Senator Dalphon's point of question. I think it's important as someone who's been a board member, and if you've got that responsibility clearly articulated, it changes how you make decisions. So I'm really glad to hear that response on your part. My question really builds from Senator Whetstone. I was thrilled. One of our staffers in the Senate made me aware of your Girls First program, and Melanie Nicholson, who's a great volunteer, I think, in your organization, and the connection with STEM activities as well. Women in leadership roles make organizations more effective and more profitable. The data show that. So we need you to be very successful. So looking forward in this legislation, how is it that the requests that you're making of us in this bill, how is it empowering you? I'm looking forward to 10 or 20 years and saying, we need you to succeed. We need you to evolve in an ever-changing economy. We need more girls in more locations empowered to, in this digital age, to be successful and contributing. Have you, as an organization, looked very carefully at what you need from a legislative standpoint to make sure that you can continue to evolve successfully and thrive in this changing environment?
We have, and we do believe that the wording in the purpose provides us not only what we need today in 2018, but looking forward. So what are girls going to need from an organization like Girl Guides of Canada in 2030? Will the words in this allow us to provide what we need to give them, and the sort of the basis of leadership and empowerment? Those are the things that we know we are going to continue to be providing. How we do it may change, but those are the core of what we're providing, and we really do believe that the words in this purpose do address that.
Okay, great. One more quick question, if I could, Chair. Are you looking to work with Canada Learning Code, what used to be Girls Learning Code, and others, to really make sure that we're taking advantage of the programming that's out there already? I've been in a couple of those Saturday groups, and it's just incredible to see these young girls coming in with their mums and dads and feeling sheepish and leaving like they own the world. And it's amazing. The transformation in a few hours is phenomenal in terms of what they then feel they're capable of doing. It's not that I don't know how to do that. It's I didn't know how to do that. I now know how to do that. It's a change in attitude. Are you looking at building those partnerships as well? Because it's so important what you're aiming at.
Very much so. Girls First is really based on Girl Guides of Canada being the expert in girls, so the pedagogy around how best to give girls what they need, but not being the expert in all of the different subject areas which are changing rapidly. So we have really strong subject matter partnerships where we're working with Kids Help Phone on our mental health program, where we're working with coding, different coding groups that to deliver the STEM activities.
Great.
So that is very much the approach that we're taking with the new Girls First program.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Deakin. Senator Dagenet, to be followed by Senator Marshall.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Now, I'm indirectly familiar with the Brownies and the Guides, although of course I was never part of them. And I think they provide a lot of great values to young people. Now, you drew my attention to something, Senator Jaffer, when you said that Senator Domino had already presented a bill concerning the Scouts. Does that mean that the administrative provisions for the Scouts are different than those for the Guides? And if there are differences, why and what are they? Because I would think that normally they're essentially the same type of organization, so they should have the same administrative provisions. Are you aware of whether the Scouts' provisions are different than those of the Guides?
I can't speak to the Scouts Act and the Scouts provisions as they went through. I just don't have any history with them. My history has been with this organization and this bill. I mean, we can take that question away if you'd like us to take that question away, but I can't personally speak to the difference between the two bills.
Parce que...
Well, because the Scouts is really just the male counterpart of the Guides, I would imagine that the administrative provisions should be the same for both. So if there's already an act for the Scouts, then the Guides Act should be essentially the same.
My assumption would be the same as yours. As a lawyer, I would think that they followed the same kind of processes. They would have put in the same kinds of provisions. Their purpose clauses might be a bit different, but I'm also cautious as a lawyer to say to you, I haven't read it, so I don't know the differences, but I would assume that the processes that they both went through, the processes to do this, would have the same background information. There might be a slightly different purpose clause.
If I may add, Chair, there is a different purpose clause, and as most people know, that Scouts Canada is no longer a boys-only organization, and that was the change where there are girls now part of Scouts Canada as well, and that was changed. It's not now solely a boys' organization; it's a mixed organization. While this,
Then that makes sense from a purpose
yeah,
perspective, why they would change.
and that's why they change. And Girl Guides of Canada specifically wants to stay a girls' organization. That's the difference.
Merci beaucoup. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Senator Dejanay.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for all that you do for the Girl Guide and Brownie movement. I was a Brownie, a Girl Guide, a Ranger, and later I was Snowy Owl. so I do have a background in the movement.
You're the whip.
Oh, it's a whip. The legislation refers to financial statements. Could you give us some idea as to the amount of money that flows through your organization? Because you mentioned over 100 staff, and I was wondering if they were volunteers or paid staff. Just an idea as to
I'm actually going to turn that over to my
money side
friend
of the organization.
My friend Jill knows the money outside of the organization well.
Sure. So we have a staff component. The actual delivery to girls, though, is all done through volunteers. So that was the 20,000 volunteers that we mentioned at the beginning, and they are the women who play the roles both in actually directly delivering the Girl Guide, like being a snowy owl, for example. So those people are certainly not paid. Across the country, though, we do have staff who support those. So there are training programs, there's program development, there are corporate services that need to be provided, like finance and IT, like in any organization, and those are usually staff positions. So we have different budgets across Canada. So we have a central budget that's held by the national organization, and then the provincial organizations also hold provincial monies, and as well in some provinces it's different, but in some provinces, areas and districts also hold some money as well.
So what would be the magnitude? Would it be thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions?
So the operating budget at the national office is around the $14 million mark. Across the country, if you were to add up the money that is held, and we all have the same auditors, so the national office certainly sees the audited financial statements of each of the provinces, and those vary across the country in terms of how much they hold.
So your statements are audited, because when I was reading the legislation, the wording is very odd. A report of a person whose profession lends credibility to a statement made by that person. It doesn't specifically say audited, but you do have audited financial
Yes,
statements.
we also have one auditor who provides a consistent auditing process for both the national office as well as all the provincial entities across the country.
Okay, thank you very much.
They're audited annually and presented every year, approved by the board annually, and our Audit and Finance Committee reviews all the provincial audits.
Would they be on your website, or is that something?
The financial statements are on the website, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Marshall. Let me thank you, Senator Jaffer, for your leadership on this obviously very important file. And let me say to our two witnesses today that I want to echo the comments of my colleagues around the table, that we are very cognizant that you're doing important work in a very complicated time. So obviously we encourage you in that work, and we thank you very much for what you're doing on behalf of girls and young women in Canada. And to those who are watching at home, just a reminder to all of those young women and girls that we look forward to when you're members of Parliament or when you're senators. So what we're going to do now is, because I understand an amendment will be forthcoming and we're waiting for comments from the law clerk, is we're going to suspend this portion of the hearing. We're going to then move, senators, to hear testimony from our colleague Senator Harder in respect of Bill S-1003, an act to amend the United Church of Canada. Then we'll come back and do clause by clause for both bills. So we'll do the United Church and the Girl Guides at one time. So thank you all very much. You're, of course, welcome to stay in the room if you wish to. And Senator Jaffer, obviously, if you wish to stay at the table, you can.